She walked into the billionaire's penthouse with a borrowed jacket and empty pockets. He needed someone to help his broken son learn to read. But what he didn't know was that she had no home, no family, and no one looking out for her. She wasn't just teaching the boy how to read. She was rewriting all of their lives, page by page. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more heartwarming tales that just might change how you see the world. Ava James stood in front of a tall glass building that touched the clouds. Her hands trembled as she clutched a thin folder of lesson plans, some creased from weeks of use. Her shoes, scuffed and loose, had walked too many miles without rest. But today she wasn't thinking about that. Today she needed this job more than ever. The elevator ride felt endless. She tried not to look at her reflection in the polished silver walls. Her blouse was clean but faded, and her smile was the only thing she could afford to shine. Inside the penthouse, the air smelled like expensive coffee and cold silence. "Mr. Sterling will see you now," the assistant said, barely looking up. Graham Sterling, one of the most powerful tech billionaires in New York, was seated by the window. Tall, sharp-suited, and impossibly composed, he glanced at Eva with detached curiosity. "My son doesn't like tutors," he said plainly. "He's 7, he doesn't read, and frankly, I don't blame him. I just need someone who won't make it worse." Eva took a breath. "I don't believe in forcing books. I believe in finding the right story, the one that opens their heart, before it opens their mind." He paused. For a moment, something softened in his eyes. "You're hired. Start tomorrow." Ava nodded, smiled, and thanked him with a quiet grace. She didn't tell him she'd be walking back to a shelter. She didn't tell him she hadn't eaten since yesterday. She didn't tell him that this was the first yes she'd heard in months. Instead, she left with a new purpose and a silent promise. "I may be homeless, but I'll teach his son like he's my own." Eva arrived early. She stood in the hallway of the penthouse, smoothing her second-hand blouse with nervous hands. A maid silently let her in, and she followed her into the boys' room. It was beautiful, shelves stacked with untouched books, a giant window overlooking the city, toys still in their packaging. But the room felt cold, empty, like no one truly lived there. Sitting in the corner was Liam, just 7 years old, with big brown eyes and a quiet sadness that felt older than he was. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look at her. Eva smiled gently and knelt beside him. "Hi, Liam. I'm Eva," she said softly, pulling out a book with colorful pictures. "You don't have to talk. You don't even have to read. I'll just read to you. That's all." Still no answer. But he didn't walk away. So she began. She read the story of a lonely lion who thought he had no voice. And as her voice filled the quiet room, Liam shifted, just slightly. His hand reached out and touched the page. Ava saw it, that tiny moment of connection, and in her heart, something cracked open. He reminded her of herself. Silent, guarded, scared to hope again. When the session ended, Liam still hadn't spoken, but he didn't want her to leave. As Ava packed her things, he tugged at her sleeve. He held out a broken pencil and placed it gently in her hand. His first offering. She blinked away tears. That night, as she walked back to the shelter, clutching the broken pencil in her coat pocket, she whispered to herself, "He may not speak, but he heard me." And in a world that had made her feel invisible, that meant everything. Julian Cross had built an empire with his mind, but when it came to his son, he felt helpless. From the frosted glass office upstairs, he watched the tutoring sessions like a ghost, always behind walls. He didn't know how to reach Liam, not since his wife died. Liam hadn't spoken a full sentence since. Julian thought maybe a professional tutor would fix it. Someone with degrees, experience, confidence. But Eva, she wasn't what he expected. She wore second-hand clothes. Her shoes were worn at the edges, and she never asked for anything extra. Not snacks, not breaks, not attention. Yet something about her was calming, real. Through the glass, Julian saw his son slide a crayon toward her during one session. He hadn't done that for anyone. Eva didn't flinch. She smiled and picked it up like it was the most precious thing in the world. Then she leaned in and whispered something that made Liam nod. Julian leaned closer, trying to hear. He couldn't, but he felt something shift. That night, as he stared at the city skyline from his office, Julian replayed the moment over and over. Not just his son's change, but hers too. There was sadness in Ava's smile. Strength, but sadness. She wasn't just helping Liam. She was healing too. And Julian, once the man who thought money could fix anything, began to feel something he hadn't in years. Curiosity. About a woman who carried silence like a secret. About the story behind her eyes. And slowly, without meaning to, he began to care. By day, Ava was a tutor in a glass tower. By night, she was homeless. After each session with Liam, she'd step into the elevator with a calm smile. But once she left the building and walked 3 blocks, the real Ava reappeared, tired, cautious, and alone. She kept her head low as she entered the women's shelter, careful not to draw attention. The place smelled like bleach and sadness. Thin blankets, creaky beds, whispered prayers. Ava's home was a bottom bunk and a small locker that barely fit her coat. A crumpled resume and a sketchbook filled with Liam's drawings. She stared at his drawings each night, stick figures of lions, of a boy holding hands with a woman who had brown curly hair like hers. He was starting to smile in them. That meant something, but Ava couldn't sleep. Her stomach rumbled, but she'd given the sandwich they offered her to a teen mom next to her who hadn't eaten all day. "He needs me more than I need rest," she whispered into the dark, thinking about Liam. What Julian and his staff didn't know was that Ava hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days. Her shoes had holes underneath. Her phone barely worked. Still, every morning, she'd clean herself up in the shelter bathroom and put on her calm smile. She'd rebraid her hair, tuck the tear in her blouse beneath her cardigan, and head to the penthouse like she belonged there. But inside, the weight was building. If they find out, she often thought, I'll lose this job. And Liam, he's the only bright thing I have. Ava didn't want handouts. She didn't want pity. She just wanted one chance to rebuild her life. And she knew that chance started with the boy who gave her a broken pencil and made her feel seen again. It was a Friday evening when the sky turned black. Ava had just finished her lesson with Liam. The boy had said, "Something today, just one word. Stay." And she had. She'd read him his favorite lion book 3 times before finally getting up to leave. His small hand had tugged hers, holding on for just a second longer than usual. Julian watched from the hallway, frozen. Then the thunder cracked. Rain slammed the city as Ava stepped outside, with only her thin cardigan pulled tight around her. Her shoes soaked instantly. She walked fast, holding Liam's latest drawing inside her bag like it was treasure. She was halfway to the shelter when she slipped hard on the sidewalk. A sharp cry escaped her lips as her knee hit concrete. People passed. No one stopped. Until one sleek black SUV pulled over. The window rolled down. "Ava?" Julian's voice cut through the rain like lightning. She froze. She hadn't seen his car, didn't know he was following, didn't expect this moment. He stepped out of the vehicle, jacket already drenched, and knelt beside her. "Why are you walking in this storm?" I'm fine," she stammered, trying to get up. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. "Where's your car?" She didn't answer. She couldn't lie anymore. Julian looked around. No umbrella, no purse. Just a soaked bag with a child's drawing poking out. And then realization hit him. "You're not going home." "Are you?" She looked away. That silence was the answer. His world shifted. This woman who had healed his son, read every book with heart, and gave warmth to a boy who hadn't smiled in months, had nowhere to sleep tonight. No one had ever made Julian Cross speechless. But now, standing in the pouring rain beside the woman who had given so much with so little, he felt small. And then something inside him broke open, not out of pity, but out of respect. He opened the car door. "Please," he said gently, "let me help." Ava looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time, and with tears mixing into the rain on her cheeks, she finally nodded. Julian Cross didn't take her to a hotel. He took her home. His driver stayed silent as Ava sat in the back seat, shivering and clutching her soaked bag. The silence between her and Julian wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, like both of them were afraid to speak first. The mansion gates opened slowly. She had passed them before on her walks, never imagining she'd enter them one day, never hoping to. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. Soft lighting, polished floors, family portraits, a faint smell of cinnamon and lemon. Julian took her coat gently without a word. His butler raised a brow, but one glance from Julian told him to say nothing. "I'll get you something dry," Julian said softly. I'm not sure I should stay," Eva whispered. "I can go once the rain." "Eva," his voice was firm but kind, "you helped my son. Every single day. Let me do this for you, just tonight. No strings." She nodded slowly. He brought her one of his late wife's robes. She changed in the guest bathroom, staring at her reflection. Wet hair, tired eyes, a heart that still hadn't let itself believe this was real. When she stepped out, she heard soft music and laughter. From the living room, Liam was curled on the couch, eating a cookie, watching cartoons. Julian sat next to him, pointing at the screen with a goofy grin. "I told him you were coming back," Liam said proudly, turning to Eva. "You did?" she said, surprised. "He never stays up this late," Julian chuckled. But he insisted. Julian looked at Eva then, not like a man seeing a guest, but like someone seeing the reason his son laughed again. "He hasn't spoken a full sentence in over a year," Julian said quietly, as Liam returned to his show. "You changed that." Eva blinked fast, her chest tightening. She hadn't wanted to be noticed. Not like this. But in this moment, warm, fed, and finally seen, she realized she didn't have to hide anymore. She had given hope to a broken boy, and now hope was coming back to her too. That night, Julian set up the guest room with soft sheets and an extra blanket. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pry. He just said, "This room is yours, for as long as you need it." For the first time in years, Eva slept in a bed that didn't come with rules or shame. She slept like someone who might finally believe she deserved more. Eva woke up to sunlight spilling across soft sheets. For a second, she forgot where she was. The scent of fresh bread and coffee drifted from downstairs. She touched her cheek. It was dry. No cold, no wind, no concrete. Just peace. When she came downstairs, Liam ran into her arms. "You stayed," he said, grinning. Julian watched from the kitchen doorway. He had rolled up his sleeves. He looked different, lighter, almost human. "We made you breakfast," he said, motioning to the table. "Toast, eggs, fruit. Nothing extravagant, but everything real." She sat, ate slowly, watched Julian and Liam chat. It felt like family, and that scared her. After breakfast, Julian asked to speak privately. They sat in the sunroom, quiet. "Eva," he began, "you've given my son a gift I can't repay. But more than that, you've reminded me what love looks like." She looked away, trying not to cry. "You don't owe me anything," she said gently. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." He reached for a small folder on the table. Inside was a contract, nothing like the ones she'd signed for temp jobs, a full-time education specialist position, with benefits and housing, if you want it. She stared at it, then stared at him. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you gave when you had nothing," he said softly. "And because my son doesn't just need a tutor. He needs you." Eva broke down, not because of the job, or the room, or the salary, but because someone finally saw her. Weeks later, Liam now read full pages out loud. He laughed more, hugged tighter, slept better. And Eva? She stood by the window each evening, no longer watching the world pass by, because now she had a place inside that world. Julian would sometimes sit beside her quietly, and in that silence something unspoken bloomed, trust, healing. Maybe even something deeper. She hadn't just changed a boy's life. She had helped heal a man's broken world. And finally, she was no longer alone. Months passed. Fall turned to winter, and the mansion's windows frosted over with soft white patterns. But inside, warmth bloomed daily. Eva had become more than Liam's tutor. She was his safe space. His laughter returned. His stutter faded. His bedtime stories grew longer, louder, and filled with dreams. And Julian? He was no longer just the billionaire behind a glass empire. He was present, grounded, human again. One night, after Liam had fallen asleep, Julian found Eva typing quietly in the library. You're writing? He asked, surprised. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Just memories. From the streets. From the shelter. From Liam. From here. It's beautiful, he said, glancing at the open screen. You're telling the story no one sees. She looked at him, vulnerable, brave. For years I felt invisible, she said. Now I want to help others like me be seen. Julian didn't speak. He just sat beside her and took her hand. 2 years later, a book sits in the front window of every major bookstore. The Girl with Nowhere to Go, a true story of love, loss, and second chances. Written by Eva. Funded by Julian. Inspired by Liam. And on the back cover, a photo of them all, smiling. Whole and standing together. Not as employer and employee, but as a family. She once taught a little boy to read. Now her words were teaching the world to feel. It was a quiet Sunday. Liam was playing in the garden. Julian had gone into town. And Eva, now fully part of the family, was organizing old books in the attic. She wasn't sure why she climbed up there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe it was the way the house still held secrets. Dust floated in the golden light as she opened an old chest beneath a faded blanket. Inside, baby shoes, letters, drawings, all from Julian's late wife and son's early years. Eva sat there for a moment, her hand resting on a small, hand-drawn card. It read, "To Daddy from Mommy, always choose love." She pressed the card to her chest, eyes stinging. So this was the pain behind Julian's eyes. The silence. The walls. The deep way he clung to Liam. She had always wondered why he gave her a second chance, why he opened his home. Now she understood. He had chosen love again. And in that attic, surrounded by memories and quiet grief, Eva made a choice too. To stay, to write, to raise Liam like he was her own. 1 week later, Julian returned home to find a small package on his pillow. Inside, the old card from the attic. Below it, Eva had written a single sentence. "I choose love too." He stared at the note for a long time, then walked downstairs, where Eva and Liam were waiting to decorate the Christmas tree. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped them both in his arms. Because sometimes love doesn't need big gestures or fancy words. Sometimes it just means showing up. She walked into their lives with nothing but words and warmth. Now her story lives in books, in hearts, and in a boy who smiles again. In a mansion once filled with silence, laughter rings through the halls. Not because of money, but because someone chose kindness and stayed. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Subscribe for more powerful stories of hope, healing, and humanity. There's a new one waiting every week, and maybe the next story will feel like it was written just for you. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment.